Hi guys, welcome back to another video. So today, as you've seen from the thumbnail, we're looking at a KRISS Vector. And this one, you might be able to see from this logo here, is the KWA. Now, I've had a few of these so far. I've probably had probably 4 or 5 of these now. And I get rid of one and then one seems to fall into my lap, so this was no exception. So the KWA KRISS Vector then, it's one of those gas blowback rifles that lots of people really yearn for, especially until fairly recently, when obviously we got the Crytac glass blowback available now, which obviously now is readily available, whereas these have been not very readily available at all for quite a while. And obviously prices, because of that, have been really high. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the backstory of the KWA KRISS Vector because a lot of the information is available online. And if I try and quote a lot of it, I'm probably going to get some of it wrong. So I'm going to just sort of say what I can remember about the whole situation to do with the KRISS Vector. Basically, the KWA were approached by KRISS to create a licensed replica of the KRISS Vector. My understanding was obviously its purpose was Airsoft, but it was also designed as a training tool for real firearms. They created the KWA KRISS Vector, but for one reason or another, there were some licensing problems between KRISS and KWA. And basically, as far as I'm aware, KRISS shut it down. Not many produced. And I think they only ran it for a little over a year, I believe. So, yeah, we're at the stage where obviously these have started to break or, get damaged beyond repair or whatever. So there are dwindling numbers of these, which is why the prices have been so high for so long. Are the prices reasonable? Well, I'll let you guys decide. I felt it was reasonable for something which is genuinely rare. However, as a functioning sort of skirmishable weapon, is it worth the money? Well, we're going to find out. So anyway, we'll start looking at what it is, how it works, what the internals are like, where there are problems, and we'll also do a chrono test as well so we can see whereabouts it is, okay? As you can see at the moment, I've got the KRISS Vector in the folded position with the stock folded to one side in its shortest configuration. Now, as you can see, this is not stock, but this is the best example of all the KRISS Vectors I've had so far. Other KRISS Vectors I've had have been pretty poor, and if I'm honest with you, basket cases. If I could give anyone one piece of advice when deciding to go for a KWA KRISS Vector, that piece of advice would be make sure everything works before you buy it. I, as a bit of a tinkerer, decided that I would get the first one I got as one with some issues, and I'd figure it out. And oh my God, it took me nearly a year of messing around to try and get it sorted. There are some really good people out there in the community which can give you a lot of help. One of those is on the Discord, the KWA KRISS Vector Discord. He's fantastic, knows everything there is to know about these. He's probably had about 30 of these so far. And he is really the person to talk to about these. And thankfully, he gave me a lot of help when it came to bringing mine back to life. I since sold that one, though. I bought another one. I sold that one. I bought another one. I sold that one. And then I ended up with this. This had been sold to somebody in Europe. And then it had been lost for nearly a year, I think. And then it resurfaced. And then, lucky me, someone wanted to sell it. It had no stock, no magazine, and it had lots of bits and pieces missing. But thankfully, I kept one of the magazines from my KWA KRISS Vector that I had previously. And I also had a spare stock, which is what it's currently wearing. So that's how I ended up getting this one. Anyway, enough of a history lesson about how I got this one. The differences between this and a normal KRISS Vector that you would find, a KWA KRISS Vector anyway, is this lower would be black. The KWAs have a plastic body, not the ABS reinforced plastic that you get on the Crytac. The Crytac, again, I'm just going on from the information I've managed to find. So again, I could be wrong here, so do correct me in the comments if I am wrong. But my understanding of the Crytac is KRISS own Crytac. And because of that, they use the same external materials as the real firearms. So the body that you get for the Crytac is essentially the same body you would have in the real firearms. Obviously, all the internals are completely different. But the KWA, it's all plastic. So now there's some people which would say it's KSC, not KWA, but these are marked up as KWAs, so it is a KWA model. And this is off the Gen 1. Now the Gen 1 had a sliding style trigger, whereas the Gen 2 has which is what on the Crytac, is sort of a pivoting trigger. One of the other differences you can tell between the two is that on the front, we have a plug at the front here for a torch, and a torch can be fitted in here, and you can then run the cable through this slot here and then onto one of the pressure pads on one of the rails and run it from that. Talking of the rails, here on mine, I've got aftermarket M-Lock rails. The factory one comes with one rail, and it is of a Picatinny type, and can be mounted on either side because you've got the ability to mount them on both sides. Other differences this one has over one you might find. I've got the SLR hand stop on here, and which I've modified slightly to fit right at the end here. This also has a steel outer barrel, which the factory KWA does not. So I was really, really pleased to find that I had that. Other than that, internally, the gun is stock. So that is the differences between mine and one you would find. The only other thing I haven't mentioned actually is that it has the safety delete on the back, which some people might find a little odd, the fact that it's deleted the safety. But the safety catch does kind of get in the way quite a lot. So yeah, this has got the safety delete. If I would reinstate the originals, I probably would, but I don't have the switches, so I'm just going to run it deleted. So anyway, let's talk about what the KWA replica is like. Now, it is, like I said, plastic. When I got this, it had the lower already Cerakoted this tan colour, or FDE, and then I matched the stock. The stock I've just sprayed. I don't have the means to Cerakote, but I matched it the best I could between the two, and went from there. So again, this is wearing the correct stock. Crytac stocks do fit, and they are of a later design, with sort of the honeycomb in. Surprisingly heavier than the KWA one, which is kind of odd. But anyway, I'm going off on tangent here because there's so much to talk about when it comes to the KRISS Vector. Now, people who don't know the KRISS Vector, you probably would have seen one in movies. It's one of the iconic sci-fi style guns that you see in movies. It has an integral sort of recoil suppression system, which basically is that this large section here not only holds the magazine, which goes in here, but in this section here, there's a big carrier which comes down and directs the recoil impulse downwards to sort of regulate the recoil. However, if you watch any real steel videos of people shooting these, I don't think it does a great job. It's a good idea in practice, but either way, we're thinking of the Airsoft ones here, so we're not going to go too much into the real steel. Now, operations. So what we've got here, obviously you have your trigger at the back here. And notice it is a sliding trigger, as I said. Now, the trigger itself is quite heavy, and it sort of goes in sort of almost 2 stages. It's quite a complex trigger pack with sort of metal inserts with sliders for the plastic trigger. And it can be greatly simplified by either just converting it to a pivot type, or alternatively, there are some companies that do some replacement parts to be able to convert them over to the pivot type rather than the slide. I actually quite like the sliding trigger. That's just my preference. So I've stuck with the original here. Obviously, you would have your safety catches on the back here. And then we've got our fire selector at the front here. All the way up is semi-auto. 45 degrees is 2-round burst. 90 degrees is fully automatic. Just ahead of it here, we've got our bolt catch, or bolt catch and release. So it will hold the bolt to the rear, and then pressing forwards on this one will then drop the bolt home. We've got a magazine release, which is quite stiff and also has this sort of shielding around the outside. It is quite easy to still press this while you're holding, especially when firing. So just be careful of that. A lot of people mount the forward grip, vertical grip, to just hold on to rather than holding down here. But it does have these sort of textures here for you to be able to hold if necessary. We also have the charging handle, which is a unique design where you pull it back 90 degrees, and as you pull it back, you'll notice it does actually cam the bolt. As I do that 90 degrees, you can see the bolt cams back slightly. And then to cock the action, you then pull it to the rear and then let it go forwards. And as it comes forwards, it's spring-loaded, the lever drops forwards. That is now cocked. I've got some fluff in there, get rid of that. You can see I don't use this very often. So now it is cocked, we can then have a feel of the trigger. Now, the trigger is quite heavy. We've got an initial take-up, as you can see there. And then you can pull through that. Quite heavy, still quite heavy, even heavier, and then all of a sudden it just breaks. But it is a very positive break. And then I'll reset, again, just letting it go forwards. And it's quite a tactile reset before the trigger then breaks again. It is a heavy trigger. There's no 2 ways about it. It is a very heavy trigger. As much as the KWA plastic isn't brilliant and it isn't the strongest thing, it is quite durable. So they tend to go shiny and get sort of chunks taken out of them rather than cracks. One place they do tend to crack though is at the rear here. Now the stock obviously just unhooks. We can see on here there is a little nub which pokes out here, and on the stock there's a little nub that pokes out. That just hooks over to hold in position, and again it is nice and secured. And then to open it, lift slightly, and then you can rotate it around, and then you've got this locking lug here. If we press that in, you can see that move. It's recommended to not just slam it home because again this is plastic, not ABS, so it's recommended to, as you fold it open, press the button in slightly and let it clip into position. Now, this section here can break out because what can happen is if you're carrying it, skirmishing, and you fall onto it from this direction, then it's going to try and pivot and it's going to break a section out of here, and then the body is toast. The bodies are not available anymore, obviously. One of the downsides with the agreement between KWA and KRISS was that they were not allowed to continue making parts. So there are not many spare parts out there. When you want to obviously get the stock back in, press the button and then rotate around and then hook it in position. What can also happen is that these lugs can break off. On the front, we have like I said, this is wearing a steel outer barrel, which the factory one usually isn't. And it is, weirdly, we have the correct knurled thread protector. And it is a 16mm clockwise. rather than anti-clock. And that means that basically your standard style suppressors do not fit this. You would need a thread adapter. But for example, if you wanted to go with the TM Mark 23 suppressor, that will screw on because it is the same thread. There are various different aftermarket suppressors available, ones which attach, like fit flush with the body, the Angry Gun one particularly. I've ran them all, but the one thing I will say with the KRISS Vector is, God, is it heavy. It is seriously heavy for its size. Running extra suppressors, lights and sights and stuff is really, you know, you're piling on the weight. The magazine itself as well is extremely heavy. So personally, I would try and run it as light as possible. So avoiding putting anything on the end of the barrel. As you can see, I've got a Trigicon MRO on this. This is a clone, not an original one, obviously. But that was because I didn't have any of the stock sights, which the Gen 1, they're very, very bulky and sit quite high. Whereas the Crytek ones are fantastic. They're very, very low profile. I had a set on a previous Vector I had. But obviously they went with that replica, so I now don't have those. So again, that's why I'm running the red dot. So anyway, magazine then. You can see here, I've already showed you the magazine. It is a Glock type. However, it does not fit any other Airsoft Glock. And nor do any of the other Glock mags fit this, even KWA. And that's because this is a replica of a 45 ACP caliber magazine. So a lot wider and deeper than your standard style Glock mag. You can even see on the side here, it's emblazoned on the side, 45 ACP. And that is the real steel caliber of the KRISS Vector in the Gen 1 configuration. I believe the Gen 2 is also available in 9mm and various other calibers. So on the KWA magazine, we have the fill valve at the rear, at the bottom here. It's worth bearing in mind that these fill valves are very, very slow to fill. You really need to chill the magazines down and hold for quite a long time to fill. It is a large reservoir in here. Holds a lot of gas, but unfortunately the system is quite old and it's not desperately efficient, just the whole action itself. So because of that, it isn't super with gas efficiency. One nice thing that you do have on the KWAs is we do have the ability to lock the follower down. So if you do want to dry fire, you can just lock the follower down. To do that, you literally just pull it all the way to the bottom. There's a little pin that pokes out and locks it down. And if you want to retract it, press and then run it forwards. Try to resist just pressing the button and letting it fly forwards because it can crack at the top here. Feed lips, again, are not available. A few companies do 3D printed ones, which, yeah, they work okay. They need a little bit of fettling. Valves are pretty good, but they do need O-rings changing from time to time. You hear mine's got gas in it. And they do need the O-rings changing from time to time. And Lee's Precision Engineering do a set to change all the O-rings in the magazines. But overall, the mags are really heavy, standard KWA stuff. And they are okay. Been waffling for a while now, so let's have a look at the internals and see what we have. So to break the gun apart, you need to remove the lower receiver from the upper receiver. Now, to release that, there are 3 pins, 1, 2, 3. And there's also a 4th pin here, which allows you to extract the internals from the lower. So we're just going to separate the two at the moment. So first of all, top pin, doesn't matter which order you do this in, but they're HK style pins. They are steel and they've got like a little spring detent in there as well. So again, they're not very tight. They do come out very easily, but they don't really work their way loose either, which is nice. This bottom one can be tight, which at the moment it is. So I'm going to try and push it out with something else. There we go. And then we can pivot the upper off the lower. There we go, like so. Now, if we look at the upper first, you can see that the hammer has fallen here. Now, the trigger pack, if you want to extract it, you have to undo these 2 screws. which removes the deflector, and you then have to unscrew your safeties and your fire selector. You have to undo these 2 screws at the front, drop the torch holder out, and there's a roll pin in the front here you have to punch out, and then you can slide the metal rail off the top, exposing 3 screws underneath, which then allows you to extract the pack from the front. And from what I've seen, it looks to be exactly the same on the Crytac gas blowback. Now, internally in here, this is all steel. Hammer is steel, sears are steel, trigger bar is steel. It's really, really well designed inside. It is extremely fine toleranced. If you get one, or you're looking at one, and it has burst issues, if you're competent with gas blowbacks, you're still going to probably want to walk away, because they are hell to get working again. Basically, there's a couple of the sears do wear out over time. The hammer spring is fairly tight. By the way, the hammer spring can fail as well. There are a few companies which have started making them now. But auto sears are pretty good, but the burst sears do wear out. And so does the main sear sometimes. I thought I would get away with my one with just sharpening up the sears and running it like that. But unfortunately, that was not the case. It took me ages to source new parts to be able to get it running again. There are a few companies which have a few spare hammers. The hammers don't necessarily wear out, but the actual engagement for the sears does. So at some point you may need to change the hammer. I'm going to just lock this back for now. You can see on here, we've got a burst wheel on the side here. I'm not going to go into massive details to how this works, because if I'm honest, it is just a faff. But if it's working, great, leave it alone. If it's not working, I'd probably walk away and find one which is working. Anyway, I'm going to pop this down so we can have a look at our lower. So our lower then, if we flip it up, you can see the bolt in here. Now the bolt is steel, and we have got the main carrier which is down here, and I'll show you how to extract that now. One other modification which has been done to this one before I got it is it has this silver pin at the top here. I forget who makes this, but it is basically on the originals. A lot of them actually come with this already, but basically this spacer is just slightly wider than it would normally be, just to spread these slightly, because it does pinch the carrier at the top here sometimes. So if you have got this silver part in it, don't worry, it's just an upgrade and it does its job. If you don't have this, if it's working, don't worry about it. Basically, the long and short of the KRISS Vector is if it's working, great, leave it alone, just lube it. If it's not working, then, you know, be careful when you're taking it apart. One other modification that I have on this one is it has been short stroked to increase the spring tension. I wouldn't necessarily tell people to do this, but I've done it on mine because I like the faster rate of fire for just messing around with. And again, I don't really tend to shoot it in cold weather or anything, so it doesn't really matter. But anyway, that's what that little brass tube is there for, just to increase the spring tension and to short stroke it slightly, which you can see if I pull this back, it does short stroke the spring slightly. However, it does mean the bolt will come all the way back, and you can see there that the bolt has dropped down. If I let that forwards, you can see it's pivoted down slightly. Now on the real steel, that does come down a lot further than that, sort of down to this position, but they replicated it really well. And it could, if the system would allow it to come further back, it would retract further into there if necessary. But there was no need for it to go any further than that. And to drop the bolt forwards, press on the bolt catch here, and that will allow the bolt to go forwards. Now to extract the internals, we have to push this pin out this side. Pin comes out, and then you can extract the carrier, which is this part here. Now let's rotate this to leave the bolt in place for now. Here is the carrier, and this is the famous V system. So basically what you have inside of here, there are 2 metal plates which are attached together, and they have some guides in for this to run in place. And this obviously, as the system is fired, comes down, bottoms out, hitting on this bottom spacer here, and then obviously it will then travel back up. These grooves in here are different to the Crytac. Now, when Crytac said they were going to release a gas blowback KRISS Vector, I was really surprised, because obviously they can't copy really anything that KWA have done. I know that patents only last, I think it's 10 years, so they probably could have done, but they've copied a lot of the system, but they've made some different choices. But we'll go into that when I get a chance to have a look at one. There are two steel plates either side here, which are screwed to a polymer body. And this little nub here is for your valve locker, to allow the valve knocker to return. The groove out the top here is for the hammer to travel. And you can see, you know, it's fairly dirty inside. I use a lot of graphite powder to help this along. So that's why it's quite dirty. So that's the carrier. We can have a look at the bolt now. Now the bolt is tiny and it is steel, but it is very, very small. It doesn't weigh a lot. This has got the factory nozzle as well. Quite a snappy return spring. Now, issues you can have with this, these nozzles fail and they are not available. I've heard of people running a high pressure gas and blowing these nozzles up. I've never experienced that personally, and I have run this on quite high pressure before and it's been fine. Things that can fail though, to extract the nozzle, you have to punch, there's two little roll pins there, and then these side lockers come out, which allow the nozzle to come further forwards because that bottoms out. There's also a roll pin at the back here, which enables you to drop this out. There's an O-ring in the back here, which can fail. But the main problem with the consistency on this is this cup type piston head. It's an old design. It doesn't seal very well. The O-ring type is a lot better on newer gas blowbacks, but unfortunately this is obviously factory. I haven't upgraded it because I believe the only way to upgrade it is to change the nozzle, which obviously will come with an O-ring type. I'm tempted to try one at some point, but I have other plans anyway, so I'll make you aware of those as and when. If you need to decrease the FPS, there are some low-powered valves available. There are various ways to modify these as well to enable them to run lower power. But the bolt doesn't wear out. You know, it's steel and it's been sort of blacked nicely. It's a nice finish. There isn't really a lot else to tell about the bolt. Internally, you can see our guides. Hopefully you can see those there. Now, things you're looking for when you're buying these is this top part here does break off. The frames do crack. This bottom one doesn't tend to break very easily, but this is a lot thinner here. If these are broken, that can be a problem because you're putting a lot of stress on the rest of the system. So just be careful if they are broken. Inside here as well, the actual valve striker sort of pops forwards here. The hammer hits the back of it and it can sometimes cause issues. You can see if you look inside here, there's a little arm that pokes out as well. If you press that back, it will move the valve striker out the way. And that is what is acting on this little ramp here. Hopefully you guys are still with me. This is a complicated system, so I get that some of you probably would have switched off by now if you're not really interested in the KWA KRISS Vector, but those who are interested, it is an interesting system, and the nice thing I always liked about it is the fact that, you know, it closely resembles the factory system and how it works, which is really interesting to me. On the front here, we've obviously got your hop unit. Now, the hop unit is a KWA affair, and you need the KWA tool to adjust it. 3D printed ones are available, but basically there's these teeth on here, and you rotate that to adjust the hop. The hop is okay. It's not brilliant. It works okay. You can change it for fixed hop with various different ones you can adjust it to, which does work quite well as well. It means you can use VSR barrels and rubbers, which you can't in this. They are a KWA design. But other than that, Materials in here, this lug here and these frames are of an alloy construction, whether it be pot metal or something similar. So they're not super durable. The charging handle itself is as well of an aluminium or alloy type. It's not steel. And most of the sort of framework inside is of an alloy construction. All the main moving parts and the parts which are doing the work, though, are steel, which is really, really good. So let's reinstate our internals then. So to put the bolt back in, there are 2 tracks in here, as you can see. We want the one nearest the front of the gun to be able to put the bolt back in, and we only want to put it in partially in first. You then have to get those lugs hooked back into these 2 tracks. To do that, what we want to do is rotate this round and then rotate back round here, and that can then be pushed in. You then have to put this rail into the rear groove and then slide it forwards, and you'll see if we look from the top here, there's the bolt going home as I push it all the way in. And then just reinstate the pin, like so. And there's our internals back in. So to remove, it is a very simple system. To work on, if you needed to clear a malfunction or, you know, take the lower off for any other reason to clean something, it is very easy to do. Taking it apart is not so easy. So anyway, let's reinstate the upper and lower. Obviously, pins in next. I expect this rear one to be tight. In it goes. There isn't a particular way round that these have to go in. I tend to all do them from this side normally. I normally tend to do this one the other way around, but I've done it this way now, so. Okay, well anyway, let's just have, I'll pull the trigger there, let's just have a quick go gassing the mag, and then we'll fire a couple of dry fire shots, and then we'll chrono it and see what we're getting. Okay, so I've gassed the mag, and what we'll do is we'll do a few dry fire shots first, just so you can see the action working. I'm gonna lock that all the way down to enable the dry fire. Insert the magazine, and then just all the way home. It is quite a loose clipping in, it's still quite loose in there, which again is just gas efficiency. You could potentially try and sort of stop that wobbling, but from what I understand, it doesn't make a huge difference. So, obviously, cock the bolt, and we're on semi-auto here. And you can see it's very loud, and it's quite fast cycling. Again, remember, I've got the short-stroked recoil spring, which will help it to run a little bit faster. Put it on burst mode. You can see 2 shots, one after another. Now, if you go to use that on the one you're looking to buy and that doesn't work, I'd advise you walk away. Even thinking, oh, I'll get it for a cheaper price and try and make it work at a later stage, you'll be fiddling and faffing for a long time, so I wouldn't advise you do that. And get one that works. And then full auto. You can see it's pretty fast, but this is faster than what it would normally be because I've obviously short-stroked that. So what we'll now do is I'll put some more gas back in the magazine, and then we'll put some rounds in the mag, and we'll chrono and see what we're getting. Okay, so we've got 8 rounds in the magazine. So we're now cocked and loaded. Now, I'm going to try to shoot into the chrono. However, I have to hold it quite far back here because I don't have a lot of room here. So I'm going to have to try and aim through the chrono, which is going to be interesting. So bear with. Fingers crossed this will work. Put it on semi. I don't want it on full. Okay, you've got 289.9. 295.5. 284.7, 289.9, 287.3, 289.9, and then I think we're empty, 287.3, oh no, we had one left, 287.3 again. So overall, we're pushing 0.7 joule. Now I have no idea if this has the low powered valve fitted or not. Usually, though, these are running a little bit hot, but that is running a 0.20, and And again, we're 0.7 joules, you know, around the 280, 290 FPS. So overall, you know, that's pretty healthy at the moment. But, you know, again, I have had them before. I get them through and they're knocking on the doors of 400 FPS straight out of the box. It's worth bearing in mind I'm using green gas there. I have ran it on higher pressure gases, even though a lot of people advise you not to do that. But I haven't had any issues with doing that yet. So there we go. There is the KWA KRISS Vector. Now, I appreciate this is not really everyone's cup of tea. Sometimes some people just hate the design. Some people hate the KWA. Some people hate the fact the KWA is so expensive. I like the design. I like the KWA internals, apart from the inefficiencies, which, again, there are some fixes for them, but hopefully the Crytac will be better. I've seen quite a few bad things about the Crytac so far, but I shan't let too much slip, but we've got the potential to have a look at that soon. And just some people are just not a big fan of the KRISS Vector itself. I think it's a really cool design. And the thing that really puts people off usually is the price of these. You've got to remember they are rare, but I really love mine. I don't mess with it anywhere near as much as I probably should do. But that's mainly just because this is a very good example and I don't really want to, you know, mess it up or anything. So I tend to, there we go. I tend to leave it in the bag and get it out to mess around with from time to time, a little bit of shooting here and there. But so anyway, guys, there we go. There is the KWA KRISS Vector. If you have any questions about this, or you want to know more about the internals or how it works, or, you know, upgrades and stuff like that, do ask in the comments. There won't just be me in there. There'll be other people in there who might know a bit more than I do. But I say I've had 4 or 5 of these now, and I know them reasonably well. But this one, I say, I got and I've just left it. I haven't done anything with, because honestly, if you get yours and it works, that's what I suggest you do. Just lube it, clean it, don't do anything else to it. Don't try and improve it, because honestly, you'll just open yourself up to a world of hate. So yeah, there we go. There's the KRISS Vector. Any questions, fire in the comments, and I will see you guys in the next video.